Okay, y'all, grab your disco boots and maybe a flashlight because this tea is dark and just a little funky. We're talking in the 1970s and early 80s, and y'all, America was in a whole mood. Scandal, gas shortages, economic disaster, and then suddenly, boom, it's morning in America again? But first, we gotta spill the tea on Watergate. Okay, so here's the deal. President Richard Nixon, yeah, he got caught in a serious scandal. People broke into the Democratic Party's office at the Watergate complex during the 1972 election, and when reporters started sniffing around, it turns out Nixon had tried to cover the whole thing up, like erase the tapes level cover up. Congress was ready to impeach, so Nixon said nope and resigned in 1974, the first and only president to do so. The fallout? A total collapse of public trust in government called the credibility gap, compounded by the entire war Congress never declared in Vietnam, thanks to the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which let the president send troops to fight without congressional approval. So, to stop any future shady business, Congress passed the War Powers Act of 1973, limiting how long the president can send troops without telling Congress. Let's back it up a little, because those trust issues, they didn't start with Watergate. By the end of the Vietnam War, Americans were already feeling betrayed. Every night, brutal images played on the news, but the government kept saying we were winning. That disconnect, it became known as the credibility gap. What leaders said versus what the people saw. Young people especially were not having it. Campus protests exploded. Students marched, chanted, got tear gassed, and in some places, things turned deadly. Remember Kent State? Meanwhile, Nixon appealed to the folks at home watching all this on TV and shaking their heads. He called them the silent majority, the people who weren't protesting but still believed in law, order, and maybe even the war. But eventually, most of the country turned against it. So by the time Saigon fell in 1975 and the U.S. didn't win, people were heartbroken, but not surprised. They'd already stopped believing. So when Watergate came along, that broken trust is shattered. Now, let's talk about the economy. And spoiler, it's not good. In 1973, OPEC slapped an oil embargo on the US and gas prices shot up. People sat in lines for hours just to fill up their tanks. On top of that, we got hit with stagflation, which means high inflation and high unemployment. Worst combo ever. President Ford's solution, a campaign called WIN, Whip Inflation Now. It was basically buttons and vibes. Didn't help. Then came Jimmy Carter, sweet man. He wore cardigans and asked Americans to turn down the heat. Literally. In his crisis of confidence speech, what people now call the malaise speech, Carter told the nation we were in a funk. And America went, "Sir, we know." Now, Carter did have a foreign policy win, the Camp David Accords. He got Egypt and Israel to sign a peace treaty in 1978. Big deal. Actual progress in the Middle East. Yes, please. But then, the Iran hostage crisis. Iranian revolutionaries stormed the U.S. Embassy and took 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. Carter tried to rescue them. It failed. And just like that, his image as a calm, moral leader turned into ineffective. That left the door wide open for a former actor to come in and take the stage. Enter the Gripper, Ronald Reagan, former movie star, California governor, and conservative hero. He won in 1980 with charm, confidence, and a simple message. Government isn't the solution, it's the problem. He rode the wave of the conservative resurgence, especially in the Sun Belt, and brought with him a new economic plan, Reaganomics. Let's break it down. Cut taxes, cut regulations, cut spending on social programs, crank up military funding, and hope that all that money would trickle down. Did it work? Sorta. The economy recovered, but the national debt soared and the wealth gap widened. Meanwhile, the Cold War was still going loudly. Reagan's strategy? Peace through strength. He boosted military spending big time and called the Soviet Union the evil empire. Yikes. Then came the Strategic Defensive Initiative, aka Star Wars, a space based missile defense system that kind of sounded made up, but the Soviets were shook. Even if it never really existed, the STI helped pressure the USSR at just the right time. As the Cold War shifted, so did America's role in the world. We moved from detente, that chill 70s strategy, to flexing our power globally. More peacekeeping, more arms deals, more influence. The US wasn't just reacting anymore, it was setting the global stage. So, from credibility gaps and campus protests to disco despair and Star Wars defense systems, the US stumbled, spiraled, and somehow came back swinging. But the tea, that trust in government, it's still cracked. Next time, we're spilling the tea on how the Cold War ended with a whisper instead of a bang. A wall falls, a superpower collapses, and history turns a page. So stay tuned, y'all. Happy studying.